Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the, which meeting is this? 135th meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. And I'm sorry, I'm standing in for the chair, so this is a bit new for me. Welcome to our guests who are here to testify on Report 2 of the reports of the the 2018 fall reports of the Auditor General of Canada on conserving federal heritage properties. We have with us from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Jerome Bertolette, welcome again, and Ms. Suzanne Gomez, who was a director in charge of the studies. From Parks Canada Agency, we have Mr. Michael Nadler, Acting Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. Ms. Joëlle Momini, Vice President, Indigenous Affairs and Cultural Heritage Directorate. Madame Geneviève Charrois, Director, Cultural Heritage Policies. From the Department of National Defence, we have the Deputy Minister, Ms. Thomas. Welcome again. Mr. Rob Chambers, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Infrastructure and Environment. And from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Mr. Kevin Stringer, Associate Deputy Minister, and Mr. Bill Varvaris, Director General, Rural Property and Environmental Management. So welcome to all. I think you all know that you have some minutes for your presentations. We are starting with the Office of the Auditor General.
Just a second.
So, Mr. Bertolette, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci. Madame la
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to present the results of our report on conserving federal heritage properties. We looked at physical assets that the government safeguards on behalf of Canadians. In this case, the country's national historic sites and heritage buildings. Joining me at the table is Suzanne Gomez, who is the director responsible for the audit. There are long-standing problems in the conservation of Canada's federal heritage properties, and we saw few improvements since we last audited this area in 2003 and 2007.
Fisheries and Oceans Canada and National Defence either did not know how many heritage buildings they had or did not know what condition the buildings were in. For example, Parks Canada's database identified that the agency had only 186 heritage buildings. That information was incorrect, so we asked the agency to review that number. The agency took over 4 weeks to provide us with what it said was a complete list of 504 heritage buildings. Regarding the condition of heritage buildings, we found that National Defence's data was based on assessments completed in the 2009-10 fiscal year, even though assessments for most of their heritage buildings had recently been updated. In 2017, Fisheries and Oceans Canada had updated assessments for only 7 of its 267 heritage buildings. As a result, the information that organizations provided to the public and to Parliament about these properties was either incorrect or incomplete. We also found that conservation decisions were based on available resources and operational requirements rather than heritage considerations. The money that was needed to maintain federal heritage properties was not always available. For example, Parks Canada told us that it invested $50.5 million between 2015 and 2018 to maintain and conserve the agency's heritage properties. However, its deferred maintenance backlog on federal heritage properties was $1.2 billion in 2017. Nous avons aussi noté qu'il y avait
We also noted that there was no link between the designation of new heritage buildings and their conservation. Needs have outpaced efforts when it comes to the conservation of federal heritage properties, yet the number of properties continues to grow. Because there has been no additional funding in order to conserve these properties, there is a risk that more of them may fall into disrepair and eventually be erased from the country's history. Madam Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertolette.
Mr. Nadler, Acting Chief Executive Officer of Parks Canada, for his presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You already introduced my colleagues, but just to repeat, you've got representatives here of Parks Canada, the Department of National Defence, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. J'aimerais commencer par remercier la présidente.
I would like to start by thanking the chair and the members of the committee for inviting Parks Canada and colleagues from other departments to appear today. It's a privilege to testify before the committee and to have the opportunity to discuss the results of the recent Auditor General's report on the conservation of federal heritage properties.
Thanks to the Office of the Auditor General for their collaboration in the conduct of this audit, and also express our sincere condolences to our colleagues here at the table and their colleagues at their office on the recent passing of Auditor General Michael Ferguson. Canada's natural and cultural heritage places are an essential part of all our identities as Canadians. Parks Canada has been entrusted with the mandate to protect and share with Canadians and the world some of the greatest examples of our nation's heritage, and we take this duty very seriously. Parks Canada administers federal heritage designation and conservation programs on behalf of the Government of Canada. Preserving heritage places involves a broad community of stewards, including federal custodian departments, such as our colleagues here at the table, but the community also includes federal agencies and crown corporations, as well as provinces, territories, municipalities, Indigenous peoples and communities, and a number of organizations active in the preservation of history and heritage across the country. Over the years, the government has formally recognized more than 2,150 persons, places, and events of national historic significance. There are over 1,300 federal heritage buildings, as well as 164 heritage railway stations and 39 Canadian heritage rivers. In addition, 19 World Heritage Sites in Canada have been inscribed on the World Heritage List. Chacune de ces désignations.
Each of these designations carries a different focus. Some designations are purely for commemoration. Some are for protection and conservation, and some are a combination of both.
Built heritage. Parks Canada safeguards 171 National Historic Sites, 504 federal buildings, and 10 heritage lighthouses. Incidentally, we're also responsible for more than 10,000 archaeological sites across the country. Some of these places, buildings, and designations overlap. For example, the Rideau Waterway, including the canal here in downtown Ottawa, is a National Historic Site, a World Heritage Site, part of the Canadian Heritage River System, and home to 26 federal heritage buildings. Parks Canada also oversees the Federal Heritage Building Review Office, which provides guidance to other federal custodians on the conservation of their heritage buildings. The agency also administers a national cost-sharing program for heritage places, providing matching funds to eligible non-federal custodians of national historic sites, lighthouses, railway stations, and to support heritage conservation and presentation projects.
We are proud of the work at Parks Canada, but we acknowledge that there are many challenges in the conservation of cultural heritage.
Parks Canada welcomes the Auditor General's report on the conservation of federal heritage properties as part of our ongoing commitment to protect Canada's heritage places. The Auditor General's attention reflects the importance of Canada's built heritage to the government and to Canadians. L'Agence est déterminée à combler les lacunes relevées par
Parks Canada welcomes the report, and Parks Canada is determined to address the shortcomings identified by the Auditor General with regards to its asset management database and the related impact it has had on the information shared with Canadians and with Parliament.
ongoing improvement in data quality within the agency's National Asset Information Management Database, especially as it pertains to cultural heritage, and will monitor the results of these corrections to avoid any recurrence of errors in the future. Once up to date, the data will be maintained. In the spirit of openness and transparency, Parks Canada will also work to improve public access to this information. As noted in the Auditor General's second recommendation, Parks Canada will continue to review the approach for designating federal heritage buildings and will work with partners to establish a consistent standard of heritage conservation across the federal government. As part of the Treasury Board Secretariat Policy Reset Initiative, Parks Canada will contribute to efforts to improve the language around life cycle management of heritage properties to ensure that federal heritage buildings and properties are managed in a manner that demonstrates sound stewardship and value for money consistent with federal government priorities. In parallel, as part of Parks Canada's response to the recommendations found in the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development, the ENVI Committee, their recent report on the preservation and protection of Canada's historic places, we are currently pursuing a research plan and stakeholder engagement aimed at identifying the right mix of measures that could be used to strengthen the conservation of historic places in Canada, including legislative measures and financial tools. When the Auditor General's office visited several Parks Canada sites, they observed that some built assets were in poor condition. Since those visits, I'm pleased to report that Parks Canada has been able to make considerable progress on improving the condition of the heritage properties that we administer. While many challenges remain, hundreds of millions in federal investments are being made to preserve, rehabilitate, and restore national historic sites such as the Fortress of Louisbourg, the Rideau Canal, Province House, Grosse Île, and the Irish Memorial, the Klondike National Historic Sites. Ces investissements nourrissent la
These investments are fueling the recovery of a number of heritage places and buildings. The agency is working diligently to develop long-term strategies and sustain these important places long into the future.
Recognizes the inestimable value of our country's natural and cultural heritage. We welcome the report of the Auditor General and are grateful to the Committee for this opportunity to discuss our work in the preservation and presentation of some of Canada's greatest historic places. We thank you for your time. My colleagues and I will be happy to receive your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadler. I don't think anybody else has a presentation, so I will go to questions now. Monsieur Arsenault, je pense que vous êtes le premier.
Merci, Madame la
Mr. Arsenault, I think you have the first question. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Before I start asking my questions, I would like to put you in my shoes. I've been an outdoor enthusiast or enthusiast of the outdoors for some time. I'm an especial fan of Parks Canada. My spouse and I wanted to visit all the parks for our honeymoon, and we visit many of them during our honeymoon. I'm familiar with the parks, I'm familiar with heritage sites, and I'm someone who's generally interested in history. So you'll understand that this is an important issue for me. I was deeply saddened to read in the Auditor General's report that we are unable to even completely list everything that was designated as a heritage site. I've just heard what you said, Mr. Nadler, and I know the questions for all of you because we have Parks Canada and Defence and Fisheries and Oceans present. Quickly speaking, Fisheries and Oceans, can you give us today the complete list of what belongs to your department in terms of heritage sites? An exhaustive list, a complete list. Can we have the complete list? Yes, we can. Since when? For 2 months, since 2 months now. Parks Canada. In fact, we had a good list on our locations. From the get-go, we did have a complete list. The problem was with our national list, and we're updating it now. It should be completed in the fall of 2019, so it's not yet finished. But since 2003, this has been mentioned. Defense.
The number of buildings we had, 292. They weren't all appropriately listed in our database. That's now been updated, and we have 78 to assess this coming year.
Et quand vous dites d'évaluer...
And when you say 78 to assess, does that have to do with the state of the roof, the conditions of its structure? What are we talking about exactly?
And so it is foundation to roof, everything about that asset, and then we list it in our database and we decide in a priority basis what we will address in terms of repair and maintenance.
OK. J'ai combien de temps, Madame la Vice-Présidente?
How much time do I have, Madam Vice Chair? Perfect. Parks Canada. How can we explain that only in 2019 will we have a complete list of our heritage sites for Parks Canada? What was the problem?
Comme mon collègue vient de mentionner, on a
As my colleague just mentioned, we had a complete list, but it was in the different locations and administered through different regions of the country. The people who administered those sites were well aware of the complete list of heritage sites and their condition. The issue, as my colleague mentioned, was that at the national level, we had a compiled list of all of those sites. It's all of the sites administered by Parks Canada. There were 17,000, and that national list had not been updated with all the details. The list does exist, I want to reassure you, and we're simply updating it. We have to import information from several databases. Generally speaking, what is the state of those buildings, the structures in our national parks? Are they in good condition generally? Because I read something worrisome. There were some buildings that were likely to fall down. How are our national parks doing? That's a very big question. We are currently implementing a major project.
Je suis capable en français.
No, I'm fine with answering in French. I just need a little extra time. $23.5 million is being used to improve the state of many of our sites. Maybe you'll find me a little biased, but I'm an Acadian. I'm from the Atlantic. This story of Canada starts with New France. Who does Louisbourg belong to? Parks Canada? How's Louisbourg doing? Because that's a jewel of the country. Yes, it is undoubtedly a jewel. And it has significant historical value. There's not a great deal of historical sites like that. It's 1/5 of the city. It's from 68. It's quite immense. Yes, it is immense. And we have several projects on that site. But you're entirely correct. Many historic sites in Canada are threatened by climate change, and Louisbourg is one of them. Okay, fisheries and oceans. Lighthouses. Recently, I'll give you an example from back home. About less than half a dozen lighthouses who dated back to Canadian Confederation. Everybody was happy last year with one of them. A few repairs were done. With this type of lighthouse, I think it came back for 1871. One of the 6 first lighthouses built after Confederation. Once those lighthouses, once the ownership is transferred to a nonprofit organization, is there any obligation on your part to maintain that lighthouse afterwards?
There are terms and conditions in a transfer, and we have at the moment 30 that have been transferred, designated, 94 that are being petitioned that we're talking to groups about. There's a process. We provide a grant to the group when they take it over. They take over the responsibilities. Some of the terms and conditions include that they must make it available to the public for a further 10 years, but they take over the responsibilities for those areas with some commitments to ensure that it's maintained going forward.
So do I understand by that for those kind of lighthouse that there's no responsibility of the department when they are conveyed to the group or the whatever association?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You're very patient. I don't have a lot of time left, only 15 seconds. Thank you for being here and for your professionalism. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arsenault.
Thank you. This report, beginning on page 1, is really is quite troubling because this report begins by pointing out that in 2003, the Auditor General found that federal heritage properties were at risk. It went on to talk about a number of problems, and at that time in 2003. Canadian Heritage and Parks Canada agreed to strengthen the legal framework to conserve heritage properties. They agreed to work with the Treasury Board of Canada to define what type of information to collect and how to appropriately assess and report on the conditions. And then 4 years later, in 2007, the Auditor General found that it didn't happen. And here we are another 12 years later, finding out again the shortcomings of this. When departments have to come back repeatedly following these kinds of reports, it's troubling to Canadians. Canadians are going to say, how do we have any confidence that the assurances that we're going to receive today and that the departments here have accepted the findings of the Auditor General, that we're not going to be back here 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years later, hearing the same concerns raised again. Mr. Nadler, please explain how we are here in 2019 hearing the same problems that have been identified over time.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Let me respond for Parks Canada, and then my colleagues might want to respond for their own departments. You're absolutely right. Successive audits found that for Parks Canada, significant investment was required to address decline in a number of our historic buildings and our historic sites. In fact, we knew from our own analyses that a number of our assets, were an agency managing 17,000 assets across the country, many of them important transportation assets. Many of them were in decline. So beginning with budget 2015, so fiscal year 2014-15, and then again in budget 2017, and now most recently in budget 2019, successive governments have been helping us to invest in the restoration of those assets. And we are now managing a program of work in the order of $3.5 billion to restore heritage assets as well as the broader suite of assets in the agency's portfolio. That work is absolutely critical to our mandate and to our ongoing success as an agency. With regard to the other elements found in the audit, we had excellent information on the state of our heritage assets at the local level. The gap for us was the list at the national level. We're working now to permanently fix that and expect that to be in place by fall 2019.
The problem of the data, which has plagued many other departments and has been a familiar refrain at this committee, is again nothing new. In the responses to the, well, in the opening statements, in your opening statement, conveyed an impression to me that again, in the face of another Auditor General's report, the third one in 16 years, that your department then was scrambling to get caught up in doing work that it had promised to do in 2003 and 2007. Why was the data not complete and compiled if this is, again, a known problem? This isn't a question of resources to preserve, but I'm just on actually tracking what properties exist and what properties require resources for preservation.
Parks Canada's 33 business units across the country had up-to-date information on the state of their heritage buildings. The gap was in amassing that data on a sufficiently quick basis to serve the needs of the Auditor General's analysis.
All right. I'll let the other departments respond to the broader question of why are we dealing with this for the third time in 16 years? Why has there not been consistent attention paid to this, and what explanation can you bring to this committee? This committee is where accountability is demanded for resources that have been committed by the Government of Canada, and when we hear a problem that has been identified already coming back here, this is troubling to Canadians. So go ahead, please.
Thank you for the question. In the case of national defense, we actually have the data. We haven't always been able to say that about every program, but we do have the data with regard to our infrastructure. We have 20,000 buildings across the country. We have 11,000 works, jetties, runways, roads. And the total asset value of the total value of our assets is about $26 billion. In our case, the criticism in 2007 was that we were not prioritizing the preservation of heritage properties, and that came down to essentially a question of budget. Our conservation efforts going forward will come down to a question of budget. Of the 20,000 buildings, 292 are heritage buildings. We have a plan to assess them. We do it every 5 years on a cyclical basis, 20% a year. We will finish the last 20% outstanding from this audit this year. The outstanding question for defense from 2007 and from this audit is prioritization and investment, and keeping runways that are functional, keeping jetties for current ships functional, investing in buildings that are being used will have to be our priority. And so the assurance that conservation needs will be prioritized will be case-by-case basis, dependent on budget.
So, sorry.
Fair enough. Okay, go ahead
So
first.
just from fisheries and oceans, the issue of basic tracking, it is an issue, and we get the concern of the committee. And for us, there were really three things. We want to give the committee assurance we know what heritage buildings we have and what heritage sites we have. The challenge with the database was three things for us. In some cases, it was listed as something on DFO's database and listed with a different name or title on the FHBRO database. Secondly, there were heritage lighthouses. There are 30 that were designated and 94 that are petitioned to be designated. They were all lumped in as designated. Okay. And third, there was one that was listed as ours, but it had actually been divested. So those types of things, in terms of actually improving the situation, we are serious about improving the situation. It is basic stuff, and we get that. We've actually had, as part of our comprehensive review process, about a doubling of the investment in our real property programming and a doubling of the FTEs that are on this. So we're confident we're going to get it right. We've already cleaned up that part of the database, and we've got a broader effort for our 6,600 sites across the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stringer. Now we go to Mr. Sarai.
Thank
7
you.
minutes.
Maybe I can ask first, and feel free to whoever wants to jump in. What is Parks Canada's role through Federal Heritage Building Review Office, and what gets considered for Federal Heritage Building designation?
Our specialist actually is Geneviève, and we brought her to answer this to just exactly that type of question.
Thank you for the question. So Federal Heritage Building Review Office is an office that is managed out of Parks Canada, and it's targeted to look at federal properties. Everything that is federally owned comes after an age threshold of 40 years of age to FIBRO for an assessment and evaluation of the heritage character of the property. And then it goes through a evaluation process. A recommendation is made to the minister responsible for Parks Canada that the building be of heritage character, or it is not designated, or is not proposed to be designated. And the minister responsible for Parks Canada will designate the building. So a building can be designated under 2 levels. It can be recognized or classified. Classified buildings are the jewel of Canada, like here, the buildings on the hill. And if a building is designated, then there are some elements of scrutiny that must be applied to them. And we will look at the interventions that are done on those buildings to make sure that they are appropriate and compatible. It's either Parks Canada for classified buildings or the other departments responsible for their own heritage federal buildings. And a building that is fairly designated cannot be disposed of without coming to Parks Canada for a proper best efforts review.
And if it's privately owned, so it's a society or a group that's been designated?
Well, not for the Federal Heritage Building category. You may have a building that is owned by a particular that could go through a process of being designated, but under another process, which is National Historic Site designation. And do you want to? No, yes. So this is another process. This is under the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada.
What I want to know is when that's been done, who's responsible for those sites?
The owner is
owner.
responsible.
And can Parks intervene if they're not complying with their responsibilities or no?
It's an honorific designation, so there's no way to intervene at the exception of if they come for funding to the Cushering program we are running and asking for money, then we will make sure that the intervention is according to the standards.
Maybe to Ms. Thomas, you said the Department of Defense has obviously priorities. What I want to know, and my colleagues had said earlier, to see it in reports over decades, same problems over and over. Obviously, it's a big challenge for us. Does each ministry and their department identify the budget required to restore, maintain, and preserve heritage sites, and identify that as a line item in their budgets? And if so, then we can know that governments didn't fund those requirements. If it's never identified, then it's hard for a minister or a government to know that that was there. So the only way I see it that a government would know and be able to act on that is if there is line items every year to say this is what we have preserved, this is what we need, and this is the shortfall. And has that been done in the last decade or so?
Thank you very much for the question. That is not, in fact, how we manage the infrastructure portfolio. We're certainly aware of which buildings are heritage sites, but we have a prioritization of where we need to invest for operational reasons. If the building is a heritage site, then we take specific steps to maintain the heritage nature, and we work with our colleagues to ensure that we're not causing any damage. Or if we're going to divest something, we ensure that we can legally divest it if it is a heritage site, but we don't prioritize by preservation priority. There are many buildings that we do invest in. Armories come to mind. Armories are the core of so many communities. They have heritage value. They, going back to World War I and World War II, we preserve those qualities.
Sorry, I'm not saying about prioritization. I'm saying about actually maintaining, just like a strata corp for an apartment building or a commercial building would say, we need a budget of X to maintain this building. We need a reserve to, have the roof. Whether it gets put in or not is a secondary question, but whether we have actual budgets or means of calculating so at all times somebody can have a look and say, we need this. It hasn't been prioritized because perhaps other issues are more important, but at least somebody can have a look at it and say, we're behind on this year. We have the ability to go with that rather than going back and trying to find from a list and figure out if we even own the properties or not, if they're designated or not, if it's the right picture, has it been sold or not, like we've just so noticed. But we should have a categorization and an amortization of the costs that are expected in every one so that any minister or deputy minister could see that we're lagging on this and maybe it's time to prioritize it.
So I'll ask my ADM to answer that question. I would tell you that we have a rough order of magnitude idea of what investment is required at any given time, specific project by project. Not as detailed costing.
I would just quickly add that we're in the fortunate situation that because we have a clear picture of the inventory and because by March 2020, as we committed to do in response to the audit, we'll have condition assessments of each one of our heritage buildings, we'll be able to say by sort of this time next year what each one requires in the way of repairs and maintenance going forward.
And would you be able to also have an assessment of what type of budget is required for that building going forward, i.e., it needs $2,000 a month for X, Y, and Z, but its roof will need repairing in 15 years, and therefore we should commit to a reserve of 1% of the building value every year towards that, so governments can budget and allocate not on one-time costs like our federal building center block, of $700 to $1 billion, but rather have it over amortized over years if we know that about every single project and have reserves built up.
I would just say all of our heritage assets are operational assets, and we are each year getting closer and closer to having exactly what you just described for all of our heritage all our operational assets, all of our operational buildings. So it's not specific to heritage, but because heritage is a part of that broader portfolio, yes, we'll have that information.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you, Chair.
I had to do a little switch, but
I appreciate that very much, but I have to tell you, you've got a majority government. Why don't you pass a law that forbids flooding, and that wouldn't impact on the roads?
Yeah, right.
Come on, get with it. No, my apologies. The roads are really bad, but that's the least of some people's problems. So, enough of that. I'm glad I got here, and I do appreciate your consideration. With that, this is a really bad audit. Like, I got to tell you, when I looked at what the week was going to be and I saw CMHC the other day, I thought, okay, there's going to be the rough one, and then we'll get, heritage, everything will be all nice, and we'll talk history, and all be all very good. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. I was rather impressed with the audit the other day, and this is just an abysmal report. There's very little in here for anybody in management to be proud of. Very little. The one little nugget I can throw out, believe it or not, goes to national defense, because in one area of data collection where we've been pounding on them about it, and they do have that message, and that was reflected here, they did that right. One thing was okay. And colleagues know that nothing incenses me more than previous audits finding the same problem, making the same recommendations, and the government making the same promises, and audit after audit, it's not done. It's infuriating. And that's where we are with this one. There were audits in 03 and 07. Paragraph 2.7, in our 2007 audit, we concluded that Parks Canada's conservation efforts since 2003, which was the earlier audit, were not enough to ensure federal organizations conserved heritage properties. Let's just jump ahead to see what the final mark was, if you will. The conclusion on page 17, paragraphs 2.67, 2.77. Conclusion, this is the auditor. We concluded that Parks Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and National Defence did not work sufficiently to conserve the heritage value and extend the physical life of federal heritage properties. They did not have a full picture of their heritage properties. For example, information on the condition of their heritage properties was not current. The life of some federal properties was at risk, properties that are for the enjoyment of present and future generations of Canadians. My first question, before we even get into the details, is there were promises made by not you individually, but the organizations and departments you represent. There were promises made in 03, not kept. Promises made in 07, not kept. What on earth should have us believe that the promises you're making today, you're actually going to honor? I want to hear from you. I don't care. Somebody start talking.
would you like?
Sure. Why don't I start, and my colleagues can chime in. So let me start with the past audits and also a series of analyses done by Parks Canada using third-party help to review our whole asset portfolio. And you're absolutely right, and the Auditor General is absolutely right. We had insufficient resources in our capital budget to maintain the whole suite of assets that Parks Canada is responsible for. Those audits, plus our own analyses, led to a budget proposal by a former minister and a series of successive investments that are allowing us to restore assets that have been degrading over time. The challenge for us now will be to work with Finance Canada for the long term to ensure that our capital budget is sufficient to meet the demands of the maintenance of our places and our buildings. There are a whole series of unanticipated challenges emerging now, and your comments were prefaced by one of them. Climate change and severe weather events are a menace to our national historic sites, and we'll have to contemplate the impact of those things well into the future in our work with Finance Canada.
So that's it? It's all because you didn't have enough money. I mean, I understand that's a biggie, and I would accept that maybe that's the main driver, but you're going to tell me that's the only reason things are in this abysmal condition? And for that, I'm supposed to have comfort as a member of the Public Accounts Committee that you're going to honor your commitments this time? It's all funding. It's all funding.
Parks Canada has an A-based capital budget of $160 million a year. We have 17,000 assets valued at $24 billion. the capital budget was insufficient to maintain that scale of assets. That's being rectified now through a restoration program, and in the long term, we're working with Finance Canada on appropriate long-term investments.
I'll be coming back to you because I gave you a chance. I'll be coming back. I want to hear from the other department heads.
Thank you very much for the question. We were not part of the 2003 audit. We were in 2007, and what the was recommended for defense is that we have a strategy to maintain, to assure conservation objectives are met in defense buildings. The strategy was the study for the strategy completed, strategy delivered. The reality in defense is that we have to prioritize operational requirements. And so we follow the indications and the recommendations of the strategy when working on a heritage building, but we don't prioritize conservation over operations.
So, like defense, we were not in the audit in 2003 or 2007 in our case. There really are three things. We're identified in this audit in one, which is the tracking, and I spoke to what we're doing with respect to the tracking. We basically addressed that. Then there's the conditions reports, and we've said we'll have those done by 2021. And then there's actually maintaining the buildings, which I think is going to be the challenge going forward, and that really is, I think, a budget issue. And as well, as the Deputy of Defense said, we, along with Defense, will prioritize our spending on our assets that are actually being used and that are required for our core mandate. When we are dealing with heritage buildings, we know about the requirements for heritage buildings, and we will be guided by the guidance that Parks Canada provides in that regard. The funding really is an issue, and I mentioned this before, but I'll give you some numbers. In our case, budget 2017, our O&M budget for our real property for our 6,600 sites or assets went from 48 million to 110 million. Okay, it was a significant increase, and we are able to do some of the things that this audit is asking to do, as well as better maintain all of the buildings. And on capital, we went from 44 million a year to 88 million a year, and that's ongoing, and it has made a genuine difference in terms of being able to address these issues and other issues around heritage buildings. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Stringer, and Mr. Christopherson. You're out of time.
Just warming up.
You'll come back.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So now we have, Mr. Davidson. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. How are you? It is a very troubling report. I would echo both my colleagues' comments regarding that. I don't have to re-go over yours, but given the fact that this report, it makes it clear that Parks Canada has really failed in its stewardship of our historic properties. I mean, is there any merit to having Heritage Canada take some more responsibility of properties that you guys have? It just seems to me that everyone's given the big numbers, and it's almost like people can't handle what they have, and they're just not saying it, possibly.
Just a question of clarification, and not when you say Heritage Canada, you mean the Department of Canadian Heritage?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Parks Canada at one time was part of that portfolio. We were shifted to the environment portfolio.
But should there be a breakup more of some of the properties back to Heritage Canada so that they're dedicated? And I'm just wondering if it's too much for Parks Canada to handle. Like, we've been 16 years since the audit, and I think Canadians want to hear exactly how long it's going to take to give us a complete list and how long it's going to take to have the audits done on the current buildings to move ahead.
The agency had a complete list across 33 business units located across the country. Compiling that list didn't meet the speed requirements of the audit. We're rectifying that. We'll have that national database up to date by fall of 2019. I can't speculate on a machinery change that might place National Historic Sites in a different department. The challenge that I raised just in my response to the previous question was that it is true that Parks Canada, as an asset manager, had a capital budget that was probably too low for the demands of the maintenance of its assets. And like my colleagues, it's important to recognize Parks Canada is typically viewed as an institution that protects and shares national parks, national historic sites. What some folks may not understand is that we're also responsible for significant portions of the Trans-Canada Highway, significant portions of Canada's waterways, and those are highly demanding assets that require ongoing investment and can be priorities because they relate to public safety and transportation. And so, based on previous audits and based on our own analyses, we brought forward successfully a series of proposals for recapitalization of our aging asset base, and we're now working with Finance Canada on a long-term solution for ongoing recap.
But is there a timeline to have the assessments of the buildings completed? Is there a timeline that you're working with?
We do have up-to-date assessments of our buildings at Parks Canada.
So we've got a full list and all the assessments have been done.
In 2012, we had a complete list done of all of our assets, and we've been using this, and priorities were set as part of that. And we do conditions report on a regular basis as well, so that the condition is not an issue for Parks Canada. We know the conditions of our building.
Okay, so any conditions of buildings that we were, looking at this report, some of the states of some of the buildings that were nearly going to say fall in, have they been rectified? Are we at risk of losing any historic buildings currently due to structural failures?
We prioritize those where they are significant risk, and that's part of the investment that's been made in our places over the last several years. So there's always, there's deterioration of some of our buildings, but we do prioritize those that are more at risk.
Okay, thank you.
I'll take the 1 minute left in Mr. Davidson's time, if I may, and ask Ms. Gomez if you can give your opinion on this, or your opinion, not your opinion, but how you saw that in the audit that you did, if you felt that Parks Canada did have a proper estimation of the condition of the buildings.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. What we did is we asked for that information in order to confirm some of the information within the databases, and at times we weren't provided with that information. So, for example, if there were documentation to support information within the databases, at times that information wasn't available.
Is there a reason for that? Were you given a reason?
We were just told it wasn't available. We didn't have it. So.
Thank you. So we now go to Ms. Yip for 5 minutes.
One of the recommendations from the OAG is that Parks Canada should provide up-to-date information to the public and to the parliamentarians. Can you update us on what has been done? It's recommendation 3.
So yes, so this is part of our response in terms of making our national database up to date, and based on that, then we will be able to provide that information through the reporting is done mostly through Treasury Board, so we will be in a better position to provide that information to Parliament and parliamentarians and Canadians.
So how do you currently assess the accuracy of your information?
Well, again, our information with respect to the conditions, the number of buildings that is under our care and the conditions, that information was always available and with our field units who are responsible for the day-to-day maintenance of our assets. So that information is accurate, and it was at the local level was there. Again, we recognize that the challenge was with our national database of all assets, and that's what we undertook to rectify in a timely manner.
Okay, I'd just like to follow up with your action plan 3.1 regarding the reviewing the process of how information is transferred into both the Directory of Federal Heritage Designation and the Canadian Registry of Historic Places. Has that been completed? The deadline is this spring of this year. And has the review process been changed?
Thank you. So in terms of review, we know where we were missing the proper process to make the information on the Canadian Register to be fully accurate. So we know about that, and we're right now just correcting the situation. So the full correction of all the glitches is not done, but the review has been completed.
Thank you. So my background is in insurance, and I just want to follow up on Scott's concerns about the safety of, well, the fact that the heritage buildings are in such bad conditions. Does it pose a safety risk to visitors and to staff? And just worried about if there's any increase in claims or liabilities, lawsuits. The government receives a lot of lawsuits. So if this is something that can be prevented, that would be good.
Absolutely. In fact, in the management of all of Parks Canada's assets, public safety and the safety of our staff are our priority. And as I mentioned, that can mean that we prioritize investments in what would normally be classified as non-heritage assets that are fundamental to public safety, sometimes over heritage assets. We don't allow visitation, and we carefully manage work in sites that might be in dangerous condition.
Do you know how many sites have been closed down because of that?
I'd have to come back with a number. Sure.
Welcome that information. Thank you.
Very few visitor-facing sites would be in that category. It would be more historic buildings used for things like storage or the like.
So it wouldn't be a historic site.
It might be part of a complex of buildings at a historic site, but not a building frequented by visitors. It would be very rare that that's a circumstance. We've got one that is fairly well known locally. Is we encountered some challenges in the restoration of Johnny MacDonald's home in Kingston, so we've closed that to the public while we rectify the problem.
Thank you. No more time left?
You still have about 30 seconds.
Well, I guess I'll just make this comment. You know, it's worrisome that, first of all, there's the safety issues, and then there's also the revenue issues. If more of these historic places are not kept in good shape, then, you know, it affects tourism and affects jobs. So I hope that there is a plan in place and that it is carried out.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. And now we go back to Mr. Kelly.
Okay. So in answers to some of the questions today, we've heard that each department here is quite confident. It seems now that their data is there, and that you now know what buildings you have and what their current state is in each case, if I understood the answers correctly. Mr. Berthold, if may bring you to paragraph 2.72, you had pointed out that the existing information, I guess this is specific to Parks Canada, you had found all kinds of discrepancies in their data, pictures not matching the right building, this kind of thing, text that didn't match, contradictory type stuff. Are you satisfied that at least by the fall, at least when Mr. Nadler said they will be 100% complete on their data cleanup, that we will actually have accurate data on heritage buildings?
Madam Chair, I'm an auditor, and I and my teams will be satisfied when we actually go in and take a look and see that it is in fact the case. I am encouraged, though, by the statements from my colleagues at the table about their commitment to updating the database. And I think at some future point, given the importance of heritage properties to Canadians generally, it is highly likely we are going to go back and take a look at the implementation of the recommendations by the departments.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll switch now and talk about the whole business of designation in the first place. The designation of a well, it was mentioned in the report. We found that the federal government focused primarily on designating heritage properties rather than conserving them. And that statement, I'm sure, is troubling to Canadians who would say, what is the point of designating something other than to just allow for a photo op and perhaps to allow people to feel good for a moment about the designation of something. But then when each day goes by and preservation doesn't occur until you wake up one day with a falling apart building with a designation attached to it, that's really of no benefit to any Canadian. So how are we going to address this where we connect the actual need to preserve with designation? And I guess that's probably a question for Parks Canada then.
Sure, probably my colleague Joelle and I will answer it collectively. Let me start by just providing a preface that Parks Canada is now working with other federal departments to review the approach for designation, considering some of what you've observed here, and that is, that includes the ability to maintain and continue to support the heritage values of these buildings, and that's across federal departments. There are multiple federal custodians. Do you want to elaborate further? Or?
So there is a review underway right now, led by Treasury Board, in terms of the real property, the directive on real property. So there could be changes that would come to the designation process. But what you're flagging is the fact that these designations do not come with legal protection for the place. So it is, as my colleague mentioned earlier, it's an honorific designation as it stands currently. There has been in previous reports, previous audits, expression of the desire to have legal protection attached to the designation process. And that's something that we've been looking into, and we're continuing to improve, whether it's through policy tools or exploring potential, what would be involved in legal protection. But going back to the point that's been made by colleagues earlier, is legal protection would necessarily require financial commitments to that.
I want to have time for just one more quick question, if I may, to Ms. Thomas. Is there, if one of your buildings is designated a historic site, does that potentially interfere with or complicate your operational use of a site? Could there potentially be a site that you might wish to either completely change the use of the building or site, or perhaps even to demolish a site for if it's functionally obsolete? Is there actually a problem on the operational side that stems from historic designation?
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. That was your last question,
Thank you,
Minister.
Thank you for the question. We have, as we noted, 292 buildings that are designated sites. It adds a level of complexity in terms of what can be done to the building. If we want to perhaps demolish a building, it does limit our ability. There's absolutely no doubt. We have old hangars, for example, heritage sites, and they are part of Canadian heritage, and they do matter. Our ability to use them is zero, and the ability to invest in them is very low. So I wouldn't say per se that there is a hindrance. There is no extra burden in terms of how we use the individual building, but we do have standards we need to follow as we update, as we refit, as we invest. And the classic example is armories. So every town in this country has an armory. They date back to World War I and World War II. We have to preserve the exterior. We have to, in many cases, use the same kind of exterior finishes, the same kind of material. It adds to cost, absolutely. And we tend not to demolish those buildings because of their heritage nature. We maintain them. We have to continue the cost of them unless they're surplus to need, and then we look at whether a community would like to take them on.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Mr. Arya for 5 minutes. Oh, a mouthful.
Sorry about that, Chair. I want to ask all the Deputy Minister one question. Is there a need to revise the Treasury Board policy on management of real properties, under which you have to look at all the properties which are more than 40 years old and designate them as heritage? Does it force you to designate some property as heritage, or do you need some flexibility? I mean, this only keeps on adding to the number of heritage properties. And, as a taxpayer, I'm really concerned spending money on the maintenance of these heritage properties. Some of these have to be maintained, I agree, but not all the properties that are being designated as heritage properties. The best example is NCC has got this Prime Minister's residence at 24 Sussex. If you ask me, tear it down and build a new one instead of spending money maintaining it. So do you think there is a need for flexibility or the change in this particular policies?
That suite of policies, the Real Property Directive, is actually being updated now, and we're working with the Treasury Board Secretariat on the exact question you've raised. To clarify, the designation is not automatic. What is automatic is a referral to this committee, this FIBRO committee that assesses the building for its heritage value.
I would like to hear from other deputies.
Yes,
too.
of course.
Thank you very much for the question. As was noted, the designation, in fact, all the management of infrastructure is being reviewed by Treasury Board. As Public Account Committee, you are aware that infrastructure is grossly underfunded and perhaps a problem across all departments. And so it is being reviewed to look at how we can consolidate, have departments share infrastructure, et cetera, rather than building new. So that said, the designation at 40 years old, an asset's often quite young in our portfolio. Yep. But there are multiple things that have to be considered, including its historic value. Mm-hmm. So a building, a headquarters building on a base that was built in 1950 probably isn't a historic building. It's just an older building. Mm-hmm. In our portfolio, in fact, not that much. It's, in fact, quite young. So I think the policy could be reviewed and is being. I think there's elements of it that need to be considered. And as was stated, 40 years of use of a building is not really that significant in a lifespan, especially with new construction.
So I would agree. The definition of heritage is something that I don't know when we last looked at it. I think the point that you've made is that the number of heritage sites, buildings, assets, et cetera, is unlikely to go down over time. It just keeps getting added to. There are no additional funds to departments that are managing heritage sites when it gets designated. It just gets designated. And then you've got some of the challenges that the Deputy Minister just pointed out in terms of managing it. That said, we get the significance of this. There are criteria to treat those assets differently. There are some different classes of heritage. I know that some of them are classified and some of them are just recognized. So a greater level of you can't tear this one down, you can't make changes to this. And if there was sort of a look at all of that, is it time to do that?
I'm glad that you brought that up. I think Auditor General looked at all the heritage buildings in total, not the different classes that are there. And if I'm not wrong, this policy on management of real property was last revised in 2006. And I don't think then in 2006, they change the definition or the criteria that has to be followed to designate any property as heritage. And two of you, I think, did mention that you don't prioritize conservation over operations. I fully agree with that because operations are much more important. So maybe all of you can give inputs into the revisions that are taking place with the Treasury Board. I think we have to use the money more on the operations, in my view, than conservation.
If I may, before I pass on my the microphone to Mr. Christofferson, have you, any of you, or are you looking, now that you're reconsidering the whole policy, looked at what's being done? And I'm giving Britain's example because the National Trust is quite a success story. Has Canada been looking at something like this, or is it a possibility? Is it a consideration? Mr. Nadler?
So the National Trust model in the UK being basically a separate operating agency that has capacity to fundraise and not in a significant way, to my knowledge. I haven't been informed of that kind of consideration by TBS to date. Parks Canada has looked at our colleague conservation organizations around the world. There are other models as well. While I agree that the National Trust is a compelling model, it too faces some challenges in that its iconic properties tend to draw significant investment, but some of the lesser properties struggle under the model.
I think that the difference is that theirs are about 7 centuries or 8 centuries old, and ours are perhaps a century old. And that would be a significant difference. Mr. Christofferson, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. And actually provides me a good segue into where I was going, because I agree with Mr. Aria. This is unsustainable. I mean, we're kidding ourselves here. And at some point, we've got to decide we're either going to pony up the money and tax citizens to make sure these buildings are kept the way the policy says, or we cut back on what we designate. and the example that you're giving, Ms. Thomas, of hangars, looking at it from a practical point of view, you do have to ask, is that a top priority? And even some experiences here on Parliamentary, on the Hill, we've seen over the years some examples. So I agree that I think maybe that's what we need to do. And let me say right up front, I agree that the bulk of the problem is money. I did not appreciate being told that that was the whole problem, and I can come back to that in a minute, because the management here has been abysmal. And that's the responsibility of people sitting here and your predecessors. But the money part is ours, and either we make it a priority to make sure there's enough money there or not, or make sure that the that the work that we designate that we are going to fund, like one or the other. So I agree that at some point, some government has got to get on top of this and make some tough decisions about what we're going to do in terms of taxing and spending to keep our heritage alive. And I think looking at Britain, who has a lot more experience than us, is maybe a really good idea. So at some point, we need to do that. I just want to draw attention, Chair, if I can, to, and I have a question at the end of everything, at page 4, 2.21, I won't read the whole thing, even though I was going to, because it deserves to be read out. What I want to say was the last sentence. We found, however, that the regional representatives we met with knew the number and the condition of the heritage property that they were responsible for, and that speaks to the staff and the dedication of people who, by and large, overwhelmingly in the public sector, really do care about what they're doing. And the people who are involved in heritage, they care about these buildings. They become part of their extended family. And so I appreciate that the auditor put that in there, because that's part of the backstop of how this, if this is working at all, It's because of the individual people on the ground as opposed to some of the management decisions that we've been seeing. And I'm very pleased to see the Auditor General is going to go back, because I do think we need to stay on top of this. It's just getting worse and worse, and you holding them to account and us knowing you're going back in is very helpful. My question is this. At one point, I'm running out of time, I won't go to the actual page, but it's 2.35, where it talks about details actually being certified. And if I might, Chair, just allow me one parenthetically to ask the auditor, what does that mean exactly? That information has been certified. That's a fairly new expression for me in terms of these reports.
Oh, here must be certified.
To the Directory of Federal Property.
It's to the Treasury. You're talking in paragraph 2.35 when they need to certify to Treasury Board?
Yeah, what does the term certification mean?
Well, there is, the departments will be able to answer better, but we saw that they needed to sign to certify that the information that they were providing was complete and accurate.
And it ended up being wrong.
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Yes, it ended up being wrong. So not only was it submitted A, then it went through some process to get certification B, and it's still wrong. And now I'm going to come back to the manual. One of the things that you're criticized for in this report is the information you give to Parliament and Canadians. That's not funding. That's competency. That's a question of making something a priority or not. And reporting to Parliament, whether you like it or not, is a pretty big priority. And that needs to be reflected here. My question is this, because I know the chair is eventually going to throw the net on me. Yeah. Where were, and I'd like everybody to answer, including the auditor, if we have time, Chair, where were the internal departmental audit committees? Where were they during all of this? And where are they during all of this?
I can begin if that helps. Our audit committee is intently tracking every single audit and management action plan, and they actually have rejected some of our actions, told us they're not sufficient, and so they are a critical part of the management of the department, something I rely on enormously. I spend as much time as I can with them, and they are very engaged. And every audit, we go to them, we review, and they review our management action plans with us before they're submitted.
Okay. Mr. Adler? Yeah, I share Jody's enthusiasm for working with audit committees, and so they too are highly focused on every OAG audit and every audit undertaken internally by the agency. Also on the broad program of restoration work that I've mentioned in my previous remarks, the $3.5 billion program, every audit committee session includes a review of our progress on that program of work.
Very much, Mr. Stringer.
And so does ours. Our audit committee reviews every audit that the Auditor General does. We go through our management action plan, we talk about what we're doing, and then we give updates at the next departmental audit committee going forward. For us, I actually, as I said earlier, and you may not have been here, the system, the challenge is when the system comes up and says there's 124 designated lighthouses, and in fact, it's 30, but 94 have been petitioned to be designated. The audit committee doesn't know that that's not accurate. But once the Auditor General has seen it, we put that before the audit committee, we have a discussion about it, we talk about how we're going to fix it, and then we show how it's fixed later on.
I have a problem with that, but I'll hear from the auditor, please.
Madam Chair, we don't have particular information about where the departmental audit committees were with respect to 2003, 2007 audits. I can confirm that the departmental audit committees that I'm aware of, particularly National Defense, since I've been to their departmental audit committee meetings, they are committed to following up on the action plans, particularly the current action plans, the most recent audits we have done. I think the problem some departmental audit committees will face and internal audit will face is the information that is available for them to determine where the risks are so that they can go out and do their internal audits. And what we saw here was the information was probably not there that would have been sufficient for them to have identified the risk perhaps and to have gone out and done this work, because we do identify that data was an issue, all right, and it needs to be fixed. And once it gets fixed, then perhaps the internal audit shop will be able to do more work.
Okay, sorry.
That they're not doing things right.
Mr.
rather than just-
Christopherson, I've given
Yes,
you
Madam
a
Chair.
lot of leeway.
Yes, you did, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Monsieur Arsenault, je vais vous donner 7 minutes pour...
You'll have 7 minutes to compensate. 7? Wow. I'm so lucky. I'm using my discretion here. Thank you very much. And maybe I'll share my 7 minutes with my friend Chandra. There's too many departments, and with every question I get 3 answers. But very practical. Very practically speaking, when you have to renovate buildings and infrastructure that are falling apart or aging, when you're setting priorities with all the infrastructure that you're responsible for, how do you establish priorities? Is it the tourism value or is it the historic value? How do you determine what will be the priority to repair this year compared to all of your other priorities? I'd like to start with Parks Canada. Well, thank you for the question. Now, for us, we assess all of the locations and properties. In 2012, a number of factors was taken into account. Sorry, we're being called in to vote. Are you all in agreement that we stay?
Yeah. The bells are ringing. It was just the opening? Yeah. Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. Confusion.
A bit of confusion. Now, when it comes to the order of priority to repair infrastructure, your assets, does it start with the historic importance? Or is it just the tourism value? Well, there's a number of factors, namely security or safety of the public and the safety of our employees. There's also the tourism value, if it's highly visited or not. And then there's the historic value. And for you, Ms. Thomas, thank you.
Case we prioritize on 3 criteria: health and safety, compliance, environmental compliance as an example, and then operations. We have almost zero, a couple of museums that have a historic value a tourist value. The majority of our buildings are, of course, on basis, many of them quite remote. And so it's health and safety, compliance, and then operations.
Okay, et la défense?
Very much the same at Fisheries and Oceans. It really is operational, starting with safety and security, health and safety, and then operational considerations for what we need it for, and the life cycle management of the active facilities that we've got. With respect to heritage issues, when it is a heritage building, as we've said before, we will be guided by the guidance that we have in terms of what we can do and what we must do with respect to those heritage buildings as well.
Une question un peu peut-être difficile, en tout cas.
This question might be somewhat difficult, and it's really bothering me. Mr. Arsenault, I'm sorry, but now I have to interrupt you. We have a vote in 30 minutes.
Members agree that we stay until 10:25, till we finish the... Okay, thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I get the impression that you have significant infrastructure to manage. There's monuments and buildings and sites and so on. Perhaps I misunderstood, but it seems to me that it's relatively easy in some communities to designate historic sites, but municipalities don't have the means to look after them. And as soon as they can designate it, it seems like they're just kind of washing their hands of it. Perhaps I'm understood. It seems that our infrastructure holdings are increasing without us actually being able to maintain them. Parks Canada. Or perhaps maybe this is a question for defense or fisheries and oceans.
I guess my short answer is that yes, assets are growing. The cost to maintain them is increasing. I wouldn't want to speak to whether it's too easy to designate a property or not. That is being studied, but there is a Treasury Board is leading a horizontal review of infrastructure for just the reasons you raised.
In 2 words, what could be the criteria to designate something being part of Heritage Canada?
Well, I'm not sure you want defense to answer that.
Yeah, okay, pas Canada.
Là, vous parlez d'un autre type de désignation, je comprends.
Now you're talking about another type of designation. You're not necessarily talking about property that belongs to the federal government. You're talking about other heritage sites. I mean, monuments or buildings that belong to the federal government? No. No, that's something else. That's the Commission of Historic Sites in Canada. It's our responsibility, but do I have more time?
I want to ask two questions. One to Auditors General Office. The policy on management of real property was revised in 2006, which in turn replaced the Treasury Board Heritage Buildings policy that was last revised in 1998, I think, or 1996. So did you find there was any changes made into the heritage designation for properties in this new policy, in the new old policy?
From the perspective of our work, at what we looked at, there hasn't really been a major change in the framework.
Okay, thank you. I got very short time left. And this particular change in 2006 replaced 13 different policies on all related to real property. Now Treasury Board, as you guys say, that is again revising this. Once again, if it's a comprehensive review, then heritage may be small part of the total infrastructure. So I think we'll have to make, at least the committee has to make some specific recommendations. So my first question is, instead of the 40 years where you have to look at the property and see whether it can be designated as heritage property, what if we replace that 40 years by 100 years? Just a quick response.
Leave it at you.
Sure. I think part of the assessment is sort of what is the appropriate duration. 150, 70, all of them may, in a sense, be arbitrary unless they're accompanied by good, solid evaluation criteria that are focused on the heritage value of the property. So age is only really one dimension of the consideration. Yeah, absolutely. And as my colleagues have mentioned, you can have a very old building that actually has very limited heritage value, or a younger building that has very high heritage value, and it's really important to ensure that what we're assessing is the actual heritage value of the property.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadler, and we go back to Mr. Kelly for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I guess really with the departments that we have here, there is a real difference between Parks Canada, whose purpose is the preservation of things, including and the conservation of things, which include buildings and monuments, whereas other departments, this is a byproduct of simply accumulating assets over time, and not something calculated by a particular department. They just wake up one day and find they've had an old building designated as a heritage piece. I note in the report that, and of course there are departments that are not here today too. We identified merely fisheries and oceans and defense because of the number, but there are other departments not represented here today that face the same issue. On finding in paragraph 249, talked about how defense and fisheries and oceans do not differentiate in how they earmark their money between heritage and non-heritage properties. Can you maybe comment on this? The point of it being a heritage property is that there are added complications to preserving a building, and a priority to in fact do so. Whereas a non-heritage building, you're free to do whatever you wish with it. But non-heritage buildings have to be preserved too, and deferred maintenance on a building just adds further cost later on. And we need to look no further than the Hill here, and to see what decades of neglect will do. So Perhaps maybe comment on this. Do both of these departments, do you plan to differentiate and budget differently for this, or are you going to continue to just merely treat assets the same and to do a better job of keeping data on your requirements?
Thank you for the question. It's a complex subject. There's absolutely no doubt. Our infrastructure, as I've said, the portfolio is worth about $26 billion. Certainly, we don't have the kind of money we need to maintain and to the standard that we should a portfolio that large. We will continue to try and focus on ensuring that heritage buildings are conserved and maintained, but our priorities will always be health and safety and compliance and operations, as we said. I will note that over the last 3 years, we have spent $220 million on maintaining specific heritage buildings that have come up in the list. Halifax North Park Armory, the Wolseley Barracks in London, Admiralty House at the Naval Museum in Halifax. And so we are investing in heritage buildings, and all of these buildings that we're investing in are in active use. Of the entire portfolio, only 3% of buildings, including heritage buildings, aren't being used. So we invest in an armory and we invest in a runway, and it's where it comes up in the priority.
So similar response, I'd add a couple of points. First, similar to what you heard, we are driven by our,
Sorry, yeah, your mic is on. Yeah.
Okay. We're driven by our core mandate. So in terms of where real property monies go to, in terms of life cycle management, in terms of safety and security for staff, et cetera, we're talking about people who work in our science labs, people who work in hatcheries. Those are, operational requirements. Some of those are heritage buildings, some of those are not. Secondly, when it comes to heritage buildings, we know where they are, we know what they are, we know the care they need, and we have guidance from Parks Canada about how that is different and how to manage that. And so that is a factor for us always. The third thing I would say, despite those 2 points, and consistent with the point that was raised earlier, it takes up a lot of space in the department. So there is a focus on some of those heritage buildings. Local, regional staff in particular are committed to working with local stakeholders. There's an enormous effort in terms of divestiture and making sure that those are protected by people in the local area who care enormously about it. There's a grants program to assist them to be able to take over the responsibility for the heritage site. So it does get care and attention, but at the end of the day, it is the core operational department's mandate that drives our decisions on real property.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Mr. Chen. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been waiting very patiently. If I had to venture a guess, I would say that most Canadians would be quite shocked to hear what has been shared in this committee today and to read the Auditor General's report. I would suspect that most Canadians would find a lot of pride in knowing that there are sites of national importance, heritage buildings that are identified as important to Canada and to Canadians. And I would believe that they would be shocked to hear that these sites and these buildings are not being properly conserved. So I want to pick up on a few points, and I quite frankly don't know where to start because there's just too much here that I want to look into. But when it comes to, for example, the two departments where, as one of my colleagues pointed out, maintenance decisions were based on operational needs. I certainly can appreciate that if a building is being used, you need to consider first and foremost the health and safety of the users. But with that said, it sounds to me like departments are left on their own to decide how much they invest or not into conserving heritage properties. It sounds to me like there's a federal policy that really only mandates that heritage buildings are kept by those particular departments if they are required for operations. So can the Auditor General's office give me a better indication of how heritage sites that are identified as such, who is ultimately responsible or mandated to be responsible for conserving them? Because to me, it makes no sense to have a site that is designated a heritage building or one of national importance, and then to do nothing to conserve it. Why bother?
The question. Once the building is designated, so for example, if Defence has a designated building, it is a National Defence's responsibility to take care of it. They can consult with Parks Canada for advice on what if they want to do renovations. However, at the end of the day, it is within their portfolio, and they are the ones who take care of it.
So they're the ones to take care of it. Under Financial Administration Act, they must submit buildings that are over 40 years old to be evaluated and considered. But once it's designated heritage, they can then decide whether or not to make sure it's properly conserved and maintained. Correct?
Well, they use it's for operational requirements. So they, as has been mentioned previously, they maintain a building if they're going to use it for their operations. And they take into consideration the heritage aspects of it, but it is their responsibility.
So it was mentioned earlier that over successive governments, there really was not enough investment into ensuring that long-term capital needs of these buildings are being provided for. Can you mention the investments that have been made most recently, and whether the Auditor General's office was able to determine if those were sufficient for the long-term needs of these buildings and sites?
We didn't look at whether they were sufficient. We were provided, as we mentioned in the report, Parks Canada had some money provided, but there was a deficit, so they weren't able to address all the backlog basically. But we didn't look at whether they had sufficient funds.
So we didn't look at whether they had sufficient funds. I did hear that money was a major concern, as has been reiterated by Mr. Christofferson, and I just want to read that first paragraph again of the conclusion of this report, 2.76, which said that we concluded that Parks Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and National Defence did not work sufficiently to conserve the heritage value and extend the physical lives of federal heritage properties. They did not have a full picture of their heritage properties. For example, information on the condition of their heritage properties was not current. So what is the solution here? Yes. What? Well, and it might be a rhetorical question, but I'm trying to figure out here. They're working hard to catch up with having an understanding of what properties are under their department. Simultaneously, they're the ones that are responsible. This has been a problem that has been looked at since 2003 with the first report, the 2007 report, and now this report. And it just feels like deja vu.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. And now for the last word, as usual, 3 minutes, Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Mr. Stringer, I really appreciate your answers. Your passion for your file. You know your file. You give enough pushback when we, especially me, go a little too far or I'm not getting the facts right. But it was very respectful and very forward-looking. I really appreciate your presence here today. You've done a good job. Thank you. Only 3% are non-active on the defense side, and as somebody who has an armory, I'm very proud of it. And I appreciate you probably did. You could have easily held up a paper and said, you know, we just put X number of dollars into Hamilton Center, because I've probably benefited, and probably on record there's letters from me saying, hey, we need this kind of work done, and it comes under operational more than heritage. I get all of this, which is why I think we need to do that larger overview. I have two questions, real brief ones. One is just a factual question. Is there any jurisdiction, any money put in for Aboriginal heritage preservation? Or is that all left to the other department? Somebody.
I didn't want to
Okay, so we don't have a dedicated program to Indigenous heritage, but we have a lot of ongoing relationships with a number of Indigenous communities where we do engage in that kind of partnership. So Treaty 1 First Nations, for example, in Winnipeg with the Kapyong Barracks, we're working with them on Indigenous military history project, for example.
Where it's a crossover to your responsibilities, but what about just ponying up money right up front for heritage? Like, do we in anywhere recognize that there's Aboriginal heritage that goes beyond, what's around us right now? Nobody? Anybody? Mr. Nadler, quickly, and then I have one last question.
Yes, there are a number of national historic sites across the country that reflect Indigenous heritage. Some of those are managed by Parks Canada, others by Indigenous communities or other...
On their land?
Yeah, on their lands and
Okay.
on non-reserve
Thanks.
lands.
It was an important part of our history. Last question, and it's open-ended. And drawing on my experience, I've been here before, municipally, provincially, and now federally, and it's the same thing always. The community wants to save them, the citizens want to save it, and the local government or the government, at whatever order, just doesn't have the means. Does it make any practical sense for any of the political parties or all of them to put forward in the next election a platform of some kind of coordination, with all due respect to provincial jurisdiction and municipal rights? And again, I've been there. Nobody embraces those more than me. But the buildings that we're talking about are in the same place, whether we're talking about the municipal government, the provincial government, the federal government, the building's still in the same place. It's the same one building. Is there any chance that we could have a national, like a coordinated, not forcing anybody, respecting rights, but to coordinate the efforts so that all three entities that want to preserve a given entity can all be a partner in that? Or does that exist right now and it's just not working? Or is what I'm suggesting just not practical? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Nadler, and that's it.
Sure. In fact, your observation reflects observations made by your companion committee, the Environment and Heritage Committee, in their recent report. We are presently doing research and assessment based on the recommendations that reflect your observation. There is a modest national cost-sharing program managed by Parks Canada, so there is some relief for communities that are managing these places. The notion of tripartite or multipartite management of these historic sites is a good one, and we're exploring it.
Thank you all very much. We would like to remind you, Mr. Nadler, if you don't mind providing us the list of sites that may be closed for safety reasons. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you, colleagues. I think this was another robust meeting, and we are now adjourned.